People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we're celebrating the new King and Queen in style with a special coronation party. With me in the studio, former butler to Princess Diana and I'm a Celebrity star, Paul Burrell. The Queen of US royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield, and legendary journalist and radio star, Mike Porky Parry. In My Big Opinion, today was a reminder of everything that's important about this country. And in my take at 10, I'll be sharing the highs, the lows, and some of the hilarity of the big day. It's 2 hours of fun and celebration. Do join us from 9.
We all know the importance of our sovereign, King Charles III, and the role he plays in our constitutional monarchy. But what is the role of the importance of Queen Camilla? Joining me to discuss this further is Royal Butler Grant Harold. Grant, thanks for joining us from your wonderful Coronation cruise ship that I understand you're on. Everyone's talking about the King today, so I wanted to talk about the Queen a little bit. What is her role going to be? I understand she's no longer called the Queen Consort, but what is the role of a Queen?
This is the thing that's been confusing so many people, is the title. And the title is Queen Consort, because as the wife of the King, it was automatic. She becomes the Queen. That's just how it is. If you look in history, that's how it's always been with previous kings and their wives being queens. Her role is there to basically support her husband in his role as king and to help him with these day-to-day duties. This is the support. If I can say, like any partner supports a partner in today's world, it's the same. Obviously, it's slightly different when your husband is the king. And when I worked for them, I was very aware of how supportive she was to him back then.
Do you think her role has changed then from what it was previously?
A lot, yes. I mean, over the years, when I was there, I could see her become more and more of a support. She's very good with him. She's great at how she supports him. They've also got a humorous side, which I think some people might have seen, where she's quite good at, when sometimes they're doing events or something, there's a bit of humour. She always has a bit of a smile, and sometimes it even turns into a bit of a giggle, a bit of giggling, which is really funny, which I used to witness as well. And I noticed today at the Abbey, there was 1 or 2 moments where she would look and smile at him, and she would just have that kind of smile, and I remember that so well. It
almost looked like a nervous smile today, didn't it? They both actually looked quite nervous. Do you think the public's grown to love her and accept her?
I think they have. I mean, I've had so many conversations with friends that were very much, if I can say, the late Diana, Princess of Wales fans. They initially didn't like her, and now they can see that she's there doing an amazing job and supporting her husband. And of course, with a lot of families, sadly, there's breakups and things go wrong, and it takes years to heal. Sometimes it doesn't heal, but I think on this occasion, people are, I don't know if I'd say are forgiven, but I think they've moved on and accept the fact that she is the wife of the one time Prince Charles, now King Charles, and they understand that she's there to support him.
I mean, you mentioned the breakup. We don't often talk about it these days, but of course, the new king has stepchildren because of this relationship, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've got Tom and Laura Packer Bowles, who again I knew really well when they joined the household, when they joined the family, and they're great fun, and they got on with other members of the family. They've got their own children. So you mentioned that both the King and Queen have got children, grandchildren, but which makes them kind of very modern. It's a very modern royal family. I think this is the wonderful thing about the royal family. You know, at one time they were always seen as the perfect family. You know, divorces and things just didn't happen. Where now they are like everybody else. You know, and they're proud of that.
I find it fascinating that Camilla's son from her first marriage, Tom Parker Bowles, his stepfather is the king, but also he's his godfather too. I find that it blows my mind. But Camilla's first husband is still alive, and that is a unique situation in the English monarchy. What's his relationship with the royal family?
Very good. I don't know if you noticed, he was actually in the Abbey. I noticed he was sitting, obviously, in the Abbey with the other guests, and quite near the front, I should mention. He's always been close to the family. You know, he's had a long-standing relationship with the king, obviously his wife, former wife, now Queen, and you know, and also he was friends, I believe, with Princess Anne over the years. So there's a close relationship between both families, which is nice. I think it's really nice also for the children. You know, it makes it, I think when you have this situation, it makes it a lot easier for families when there's obviously been a divorce and separation and a remarriage. It makes it easier, I think. So it's nice to see them as one family united today in the Abbey.
Well, Grant, you mentioned Princess Anne, which brings me to the question, who is the best royal and why is it Princess Anne?
Princess Anne. I think Princess Anne is a favourite because I don't know one person that doesn't like Princess Anne. And at one time, I think it was said she was the hardest working royal, with obviously the king's just slightly behind. She's very popular, and I think the reason she's popular, she's a bit like her late father. She does it and says it as she does. You know, she doesn't kind of mix her words. And, you know, famously, she's been seen for being like that. And I think people like that. You know where you are with her. I thought she was amazing. I always thought it was great to see her. And it makes me smile because, as you know, I live in the Cotswolds. I live on the Highgrove estate. And she's often seen popping into local shops. And people that know me will say, Princess Anne was in here the other day, as if it's a shock. But, you know, they are, as I said earlier on, they are quite down to earth. They're quite normal. They do a lot of the things that you and me do.
Yeah, I mean, she put over 200 public appearances in the last year, so she's one of the ones really on the grind. But Grant, to wrap up, is Queen Camilla ready to be Queen?
I think she is. You know, she's supported her husband, the longest Prince of Wales in history. They've been married 18 years. I was lucky enough to be at that wedding. I've witnessed the early years of the relationship, of their marriage, and I could see even then that she would be perfect for this role. She's going to be making an excellent queen and a great support to her husband, King Charles.
Thank you, Grant Harold, very much. I want to bring Emma Webb into this now. Emma, this is the first time we've had a king married to a divorcee who still has a living former husband. It's all very complicated, very modern. Is this a good thing? Is it like contemporary monarchy?
Well, firstly, I think the tradition has always been that the members of the royal family couldn't marry divorcees. That was always a sort of the idea that the head of the church would marry a divorcee, would be a divorcee. That's all very new in itself. This is obviously unprecedented. But then again, as head of the Church of England was almost sort of founded on divorce anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So in many ways, it's a continuation of a slightly different tradition. But I do think, obviously, that this has been pointed out as symbolic of many of the broken and then refused families that we have across Britain, and I think many people probably see themselves reflected in this. And going back to the conversation that we had previously about, you know, whether or not the monarchy needs to be modern, I think that is the abstract concept of modernity. I think it's a mistake to try and make the argument that the monarchy even has to prove its legitimacy. Almost by having to prove its legitimacy, that almost undermines its legitimacy. So.
Nigel, I'm friends with both you and your wife. I adore you both. But you are a very modern family. Does this make the monarchy feel more representative to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole modernisation process happened back in 2013. I mean, now we have a situation where it's not just the eldest son that can inherit, but the eldest daughter to become the next monarch. So that was a way forward. The king could now be married to a Catholic, which hadn't happened before. Yeah, that was also changed. That was also changed in that legislation. So the work has been done to modernise the monarchy anyway. The question really is that do we have too many of them? So there's the argument over the slimmed down monarchy. Should they be paying rather more tax than they do? Those are the kind of modern issues, if you like, the monarchy's got to address.
Are you a monarchist?
I'm a monarchist, but not a royalist.
OK. Emma, are you a monarchist?
I think I'm probably both of those things, though I'm not entirely sure what the distinction is.
Well, the distinction is I'm a monarchist because I believe in a monarch as head of state, a non-political head of state. I'm not a royalist because I don't go along with all the stuff that goes around it. I think that I feel more of a citizen rather than a subject, which is what I think.
Oh, I see. I feel more like a subject than a citizen,
yeah.
so I'm both a monarchist and a royalist.
I'm with Emma on this one. But I think it's also important to point out that being a monarchist doesn't mean you like the king. It's not about liking King Charles. This is a lot
I like the institution.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely,
and I think that's the correct way of viewing the office of state and the constitutional role of the monarchy within the ecosystem of the institutions of our constitutional settlement.
Because what's the alternative?
Well, this is the point. I mean, you know, how would you like President Boris Johnson? So that would be the alternative. And this is where where I keep going about the importance of the Protestant monarch. Right. You then start looking at the way Parliament works. Do we then take Church of England bishops out of the House of Lords, who are legislators as of right? And you start unpicking the whole constitution when you start changing it. And that's why I'd like to keep things broadly as they are.
It's interesting because the Republic guys who weren't out there in force as they imagined they were going to be would like to get rid of the constitutional monarchy. But I don't think the default option necessarily would be a presidential system. I think we could go towards an absolute monarchy. Wouldn't that be better?
Oh, Calvin, calm down. Well, firstly, shall we just say that I went to Trafalgar Square this morning and I saw the little gaggle of anti-monarchy protesters. And they were a teeny tiny little crew. So I think we can...
The minority.
And actually, they got themselves right to the front and they had their banners up in front of children who were sitting on their parents' shoulders and probably couldn't see through the banners, which I think was a shame that people who would have liked to have been there to see it couldn't see through their flags. But that aside, yeah, I don't think that we should be an absolute monarchy. I think that we have the ideal settlement right now. And it's been pointed out this week, and I think, though I do think it's a terrible idea to go down the route of trying to financially and economically justify the royal family or argue against it, it's been pointed out this week that actually, in comparison to the heads of state of the United States and France, we actually pay a lot less taxpayers' money towards the monarchy, and also they bring an awful lot of money in. I think that's a terrible argument for saying that they're legitimate. I think that is a total aside. But I think those people who want to have a republic with an elected head of state, who are they expecting to be the head of state? Can you imagine
another
President Tony Blair?
Yeah, awful situation. We do not want another elected head of state. But these Republic guys, these protesters, a lot of them have been arrested.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a bit heavy-handed?
Yes. I mean, Emma was there, so you can say whether they're posing a threat or not. I mean, the police seem to argue they were equipped for locking on, and there's some dispute about whether they were or not, and that the equipment they had was just to hold their banners together. People should be allowed to protest. My advice to the protesters would be, don't do it on a day like this, don't ruin it for other people, but they still have the right to do it should they want to.
I agree with you, Nigel, and actually I think the police have been quite heavy-handed, but they've shown what they can do. So the next time we have a Just Stop Oil protest blocking the roads and the police are saying we can't do anything, clearly it's a lie.
Yeah, obviously they can do something about it. I mean, all this goes back to changes in the Crime and Policing Act from last year, the new legislation which came through, which is a lower bar for arresting protesters. The police decided to make that lower bar the norm today.
Is it double standards, Emma?
I think we do.
Two-tier policing.
I absolutely think that we have serious double standards and inequality in the way that different groups are treated by the police, different protest groups, whether they're a group that is, promoting objectives that are fashionable at the time or whether they're not. I disagree with this new legislation, and I think that people absolutely do have the right to protest. I don't know what the details were as to why exactly they were arrested. I only popped in the morning to have a little poke around and wasn't actually there at the time. Somebody did mention to me, who was in the crowd, said that they thought that they had some kind of audio equipment equipment. Maybe they were planning on shouting over the procession or something, which perhaps would be in violation of that new legislation. I don't know.
It's just a lack of common decency, isn't it?
I think that the new legislation is heavy-handed. I think that all they had to do was actually enforce the laws that already existed in order to deal with protesters like Just Stop Oil and others who are doing things like criminal damage or breaking the law in other ways. So absolutely, I think they have the right to protest. I also think that they're wrong, and I think they're a tiny minority of people. And I think that having an elected head of state would be enormously divisive.
Absolutely spot on. I think we all agree on far too much. But there's plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next up, we will be discussing whether or not the coronation was anti-Catholic.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Is watching.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. The Act of Settlement in 1701 ruled out any Catholics or their spouses from becoming monarch. The legislation made it clear that no sovereign, quote, shall profess the popish religion or shall marry a papist. Strong language. The sovereign must promise to uphold the Protestant succession, so it begs the question, is the coronation anti-Catholic? Joining us now to discuss this is James Somerville-Meikle, Deputy Director of the Catholic Union. Well, James, first of all, is it anti-Catholic?
Well, Calvin, good evening. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you for coming.
Is it anti-Catholic? I think it's definitely pro-Christian.
Right.
I was really struck by the service today by just how overtly Christian it is. And the very first words you heard today were, I come in his name and after his example, not to be served, but to serve. And I think all Christians watching that could find common cause with the example of our Lord. Whether it's anti-Catholic, I think we've got a lot better. So 100 years ago in 1902, when King Edward VII took the oath, so he swore that the Catholic Mass was superstitious and idolatrous. So we've come a long way since then. Clearly, the oath that King Charles swore today, he swore to be a faithful Protestant and that his heirs and successors would be Protestant. But I think he really went out of his way in the prayers before that oath and in the greeting he gave to faith leaders afterwards to make it clear that he would be a leader for people of all faiths and none. So I think for Catholics today, it's a great moment of celebration.
I like your stance, and for the first time, obviously, since the Reformation, there was a Catholic bishop involved in the coronation, actually giving God's blessing to the king in Cardinal Nichols. I thought that was amazing to see, Christian unity, and also the Pope's Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, was here too. Now, that is significant. I thought, OK, this is great. Christian unity, Protestants, Catholics coming together in Christ. However, the response has not been that way online. So obviously, the Pope gave a true relic of the true cross to the king to put in his cross for the procession. Again, I thought that was great. A lot of Catholics have been commenting, why are we allowing this? Because it's a fake mass with a fake ceremony, a fake sacrament, and we have a lot of Protestants cosplaying. Now, that doesn't shout to me Christian unity, but is this a common kind of conception?
Well, I think you have to cast your mind back to 1953, when Her late Majesty was crowned. And at that ceremony, the papal delegation waited outside the Abbey. You know, they weren't even involved in the ceremony. So we've come an awful long way, and I think there is often a tendency to look at things and to think that things could be so much better, and that's true. I think there's still a way to go in terms of improving interfaith dialogue. But my goodness me, I mean, we've come such a long way. You know, from 1953, when the papal delegation waited outside the Abbey. You know, today we had Cardinal Nichols, the leader of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, part of the ceremony, taking part in those prayers. As you mentioned, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, gave a true relic of the cross to King Charles to use as part of the ceremony. So we've come a long way. And, you know, I think to those people who are frustrated with today's ceremony, I would say that, you know, cast your minds back to where we were 70 years ago. I think we've come an awful long way. And, you know, when Charles, this monarch, professes to be defender of the faith, I think he says that, you know, yes, on the one hand, to uphold the Protestant faith, but through his words and his deeds, he's shown that he wants to represent and support people of all faiths. And I think Catholics and people of all faiths can draw great strength and comfort from that.
I'm with you on that. I think, actually, when we look at the Nigel Raised, the 2013 Settlement Act, that now the monarch can marry a Catholic. So in the future, we could even have a mixed marriage monarchy, which would be strengthening the relationship between Rome and Canterbury.
It would be interesting. I mean, as you say, it was only 10 years ago that if you married into the royal family, you had to give up your claim to the throne. That was one of the last acts of Her late Majesty the Queen, making sure that if you married in the royal family, you didn't have to, it wasn't a choice between your faith or the crown. Huge progress on that front. There is further to go, of course there is, but I think today is a great day for celebration and to recognise how far we've come. I mean, looking back to 1902, as I was saying, when, you know, King Edward VII said that the Catholic Mass was superstitious and idolatrous, and we've come so far from then. And actually, I think having a defender of the faith is very appealing for people who are of different faiths, because in a world that feels increasingly hostile to people who have any faith, having someone there who was overtly a defender of the faith is very comforting.
And in fact, if we look at the coronation service itself, it has maintained its Catholicity even throughout the Protestant Reformation. So that's something to cling on to. Let's have a look at what you guys have been saying in the Crusader comments. Before we take a final break, we'll have a look at what you've been saying about today's topics. And Tony says, I think the coronation was as good as it could have been Christian-wise. I think the Bible was honoured, and inviting representatives of other faiths was an acknowledgement that the king was over everyone who lives in Britain, not just Christians. That is a very fair point, Tony. Thank you for that. God was honoured even though a lot of people might not have been believers. This is the inherited religion of our country, and it would be wrong to mix Islamic or Hindu or whatever with a Christian service. Yeah, I mean, you're hitting all the nails on the head there, Tony. Thank you for that. Beryl wrote in to say, Calvin, this country, in quotation marks, which Charles is king of, is not just England. There is a union. It's called United Kingdom of Great Britain. Or Great Britain. Well, yes, it is. It's called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Absolutely, I'm with you. I don't know what you're correcting me on, but what I would say is that the service itself was English, and the service itself has maintained its Englishness from the 10th century. So we've maintained that service itself, although we are one country. We can still have elements of Englishness. It's not something to be ashamed of. Even though we're British, we're English too. Coming up in the final part of my Common Sense Crusade this week, we'll be talking to the Venerable Dr. Hassan John about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Earlier on this week, we were invited to swear allegiance to the King. So I took to Twitter and asked, did you swear a pledge of allegiance to the King in his coronation today? The answers were either long live the King, may the King live forever, or Republican cringe. And the results are quite surprising, actually. That's the closest poll we've had so far. 66% of you said long live the King. Only 4% of you said may the King live forever. But 29% of you are cringe Republicans. I'm so sorry to hear that. Now, 2 Catholic priests have been kidnapped in the Nigerian Delta. Unfortunately, the kidnapping of Christians is not a rare occurrence in Nigeria. So joining me to discuss this ongoing crisis is the Venerable Dr. Hassan John. Thank you very much for joining us today to talk about this serious topic. Can you start off, please, by telling us how widespread the persecution is in Nigeria?
Indeed, persecution in northern Nigeria is very wide. Actually, it has a history. I would say it's been very subtle in the last 3 decades or so, but then it started growing in intensity around 2000. By 2001, it now escalated, especially in the central region of Plateau State in Nigeria. And then Boko Haram, the terrorist radical Islamic group, came into the equation by 2009. And from then on, it went very, very violent. And, it's been in the news all these years. And till now, it has not ebbed. Indeed, in the last 4 or 6 weeks, more than 200 people have been killed in central Nigeria, and just another 7 about 2 or 3 days ago. So it's been persistent.
I don't feel like we're hearing about this as much. And when we are hearing about this, it seems that the mainstream media is deliberately misrepresenting the persecution as being anything other than the work of Muslim extremists. But it's Muslim extremists that are trying to stamp out Christianity in northern Nigeria, isn't it?
That's correct. And you know why you don't hear so much about it, especially here in the West, is because there is a deliberate act by the Nigerian government, I must say, and some maybe state actors to deny, deflect, and defend the persecution against Christians in the country. So they've targeted everything else but an attack against Christian communities. So the climate change has been blamed for it a lot. And there is also this, pushback to say that, a particular tribal group is being called out to be the terrorist organizations and things like that. But the thing is, why it hasn't come in is because it creates a lot of complexity, and the international media just doesn't even know how to approach it or even how to handle it. Because when anything that seemed to come with a conflict or between Christianity and Islam, a lot of people just don't want to go there because they feel it's a very delicate place, it's a very volatile place, it's a quagmire, and people just don't want to get to that level. Unfortunately, dozens of people get killed every week.
I'm surprised to hear that climate change is being used as an excuse even over there in Nigeria. The Primate of Nigeria spoke at the R20, which is part of the G20 in Bali in November, and said that Christians in Nigeria are facing genocide in slow motion. Would you say that's accurate?
Exactly. I mean, the all-parliamentary group about 2 years ago asked the same question. Is there an unfolding genocide going on in Nigeria? And I think quite a number of publications have raised that issue because, so there is this strategic wiping of villages and Christian communities, predominantly in it started in northeastern Nigeria with Boko Haram, and then eventually the cell groups of radical Islamic groups and cell groups. So let me underscore the radical Islamic militia groups, because what we have seen are well-organized, well-equipped, and strategic decimation of Christian villages in central Nigeria. And I have been to so many villages. I mean, I've unfortunately had to preside as a Christian, or go over so many other mass graves when there are mass funerals, and you hear testimonies of these victims, those that have survived, telling you about the high caliber weaponry that is used, the night vision goggles that are involved. So we're not talking about just climate change or clash between herders and farmers like the Nigerian government wants the international community to believe. But this is a strategic picking out of communities and wiping them. We have more than 2.5 million refugees from central Nigeria alone, and this is record is online. But why attention hasn't been brought to this, and why these things seem to just be overlooked, is really a question that many of us in Nigeria are still asking.
I hear you. Hassan John, thank you so much for shedding a light on this, and you are in my prayers, and the whole of Nigeria is in my prayers. And to my viewers, if you can, please donate to Open Doors at www.opendoors.org. But for now, here's the closing prayer for this week. Each week, we like to end the show with our closing prayer, and today is the collect for St. John the Apostle in Eastertide. O God, who with the oil of gladness didst anoint blessed John, a companion in the tribulation and patience of the Lord Jesus, grant us likewise so to rejoice in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, we may be glad with exceeding joy, through the same Jesus Christ, thy Son, our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the unity of the Holy Spirit, ever one God, world without end. Amen. You have been watching Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, Calvin Robinson. I will be back next Saturday at 7 p.m. Next up, it's the wonderful Saturday 5. Before that, here's your weather forecast, Deus Vult, and God Save the King.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. We've got rain or showers in the forecast through the rest of the long weekend, but there will be some warm sunny spells, particularly through Sunday. You can see on the weather chart we've got a brief ridge of high pressure moving in for Sunday to settle things down for a time, but it's not long before further weather systems move in from the Atlantic to give some wet and windy weather on Monday. Quite cloudy out there through the rest of Saturday evening, patchy rain across the eastern side of the UK, largely dry further west, but a lot of cloud around into the early hours, the risk of some light rain and drizzle in places, some mist and murk too, but temperatures holding up as a result, 11 or 12 degrees for many of us to start Sunday morning. Best of the sunshine across western parts of the UK, quite grey across the east, particularly along the coast with some rain and drizzle in places, but it should brighten up here through the day, some sunny spells developing, but also the risk of a few heavy showers. Plenty of sunny spells across the rest of the UK, almost unbroken in places across central southern England, and this will lift temperatures 21, 22 Celsius possible in the best of the sunshine. Into the evening time, just starts to cloud over across Northern Ireland, western Scotland as the next set of weather systems move in. Some low cloud affecting eastern coasts of England and Scotland into the early hours. And then overnight, this band of rain slowly pushes its way in, affecting western areas. The rain could be heavy at times, the winds picking up. The clearest skies holding on across the southeast. Temperatures again remaining in double figures. Perhaps a murky start in the southeast, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches, but some sunshine too. Elsewhere, wet start to the day, outbreaks of rain. The rain could be heavy at times, accompanied by some strong winds through the Irish Sea, and it just slowly pushes its way north and eastwards through the day, perhaps East Anglia holding on to the driest weather. Over the next few days into next week, it stays largely unsettled, temperatures above average.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5 with everything that you need for a proper coronation after party. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Amoncona, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Patrick Christys. Tonight on the show, I'm going to be telling you who the forgotten royals who have been fantastic today are.
I'm going to be talking about why young Brits don't seem to care about the coronation.
I can't get my head around why you'd want to turn up at a coronation just to ruin it for the enjoyment of everyone else.
And I'll be telling you why I'm a proud lefty and a proud monarchist.
I'll also be telling you why some privacy-hungry eco-warrior traitor decided to rack up 15 tonnes of carbon emissions just to come to the coronation and then leave very speedily again in a BMW. That's right, it's Prince Harry. But I'm asking, is he a bad dad?
It's 8 o'clock and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome back to the Saturday 5 on this very special Coronation Day, the best patriotic after party that you could possibly hope for. Expect fiery debates, spicy opinions, but a huge topping of right royal fun today. Every week you can join Albie, Emily, Benjamin and myself along with a guest star. Tonight it's none other than Patrick Christys.
Now, the premise of this show is very simple. Each host outlines their argument about a chosen topic, then we all pile in and have a right royal go at each other. And of course, we want to know your views as well. Please do get in touch throughout the show by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. But before we start tearing each other apart, it is your Saturday Night News with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Bethany Elsey with a look at today's coronation news from the GB Newsroom. A moment of history for Commonwealth and country as King Charles III is crowned the nation's monarch.
God save the King!
God save the King! In a spiritual and deeply personal event for the King, the Archbishop of Canterbury placed St Edward's crown on Charles's head. He was anointed before God, and the Prince of Wales, William, pledged his loyalty, life and limb to his father. King Charles became the 40th monarch to be crowned at Westminster Abbey. Although he's been king for 8 months, today he truly wears the crown, following the death of his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, after a 70-year reign. Immediately after the King, Queen Camilla was anointed and crowned with Queen Mary's crown by the Archbishop of Canterbury. King Charles and Queen Camilla appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. They waved to the thousands who gathered to pay their respects. They were joined by the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children. The two of the King's siblings, Princess Anne and Prince Edward, also came out to greet supporters. Due to the weather, a scaled-back flypast of Royal Air Force jets, including the famous Red Arrows, flew over the crowds that filled the Mall and over the nation's new king. The armed forces staged the largest ceremonial military operation since the late Queen's coronation in 1953. 4,000 servicemen and women took part in a parade that stretched a mile long, including the Household Cavalry, the Sovereign's Bodyguard and Royal Watermen. The military parade also featured troops from nations across the Commonwealth and the British Overseas Territories. In typical British weather, there was heavy rain, but that failed to dampen the enthusiasm of the crowds who gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the King and Queen. All procession viewing areas along the route were filled to capacity. Fans cheered Charles and Camilla as they travelled down the Mall in the Gold Stake coach, which is over 260 years old and has been used at every coronation since 1831. We spoke to some of the 10,000 people who turned up.
Amazing, just absolutely amazing. Yeah, just congratulations to the King and Queen Camilla. Unbelievable.
Very wet, but tiring, but what a spectacle. Nobody else can do it better than us, can they?
We weren't expecting to see them on the balcony. We didn't think that we would get that close because we were quite far back. So, yeah, it's just a good day to be British.
We loved it. If it wasn't so wet.
God save the King, God save the King, God save the King.
Well, just hours before the coronation, police arrested the leader of anti-monarchy group Republic, along with 52 others lining the procession route. Republic had previously promised to stage the biggest protest against a British monarch in modern history. Activists dressed in yellow T-shirts demanded an elected head of state and said the royal family has no place in modern constitutional democracy. A number of Just Stop Oil protesters were also detained. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
It is Saturday night. You're with the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver. I can promise you that you are in for a very lively hour. So let's crack on straight on with tonight's first discussion. To kick us off, Darren is going to tell us why he thinks the working royals are the bedrock of Britain. Take it away.
Listen, the weather might not be on our side today, but I reckon the rain during coronations is now new whatsoever. The Met Office actually told me that. They reported that the last 5 coronations had actually endured rain, so God bless these damp islands of ours. But today, King Charles III was filled with joy on that balcony as he looked out at Britain, frankly, at our best, alongside the, of course, exemplary efforts of His Majesty's Royal Air Force, the armed forces, the police, emergency services, and of course the public that packed outside of the palace. The exceptional coverage from this very channel, of course, added to that sense, I think, of pride and unity among the British people. But I reckon it's about time that we gave a few shout-outs to a few others. How brilliant was Princess Anne, frankly, the gold stick in waiting. That was her title today. She was trusted with keeping the monarch safe and leading the procession on horseback. But Princess Anne also served another role here, folks. She blocked out the Ginger Whinger, so I think just for that, she deserves a medal, another one. And of course, Prince Louis, despite only being a mere 5-year-old, he showed that he's got more character than most adults, right? He was belting out the national anthem. He was kicked out, actually, for the next anthem, so goodness only knows what he got up to in between that. And he was waving everybody, as you can see on your telly screens right now, on radio, he's waving like you wouldn't believe, in spectacular fashion. Now, I have to give also a really special shout-out to Penny Mordaunt. Now, Penny is leader of the House of Commons, and she's got a title, another title, Lord President of the Council. Now, she was given that job, honestly, by both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak to put a former leadership contender out of sight and out of mind. That's backfired somewhat. Penny Mordaunt carrying that sword, she must have biceps of steel. She was carrying it for goodness only knows how long. Longer than Liz Truss was actually in office, I reckon. So all props to her. She was actually a star of the show, unlike Rishi Sunak. But anyway, let's see what the panel think. I mean, Albie, who were your standouts?
So I think I would agree with you. I think Penny Mordaunt was an absolute standout. But I think one of the things that was actually quite different with this coronation compared to the last coronation are actually, there are a lot of women taking a lot of quite senior roles in this coronation. Penny Mordaunt was the first woman to do that role that she did, holding the sword. We also saw female bishops, because, of course, female bishops were only allowed in this country since 2016. Can you believe that? So we saw a lot of women in prominent roles which would have traditionally been filled by men, and we absolutely love to see it.
How lovely. Girl power.
I mean, we also did have a queen on the throne for 70 years. You know, that's doing a fair bit for girl power.
But yeah, Penny Mordaunt, I mean, she did look fabulous. I wouldn't say she stole the show, because that would be a bad thing to say, but she did look brilliant, and she got all the Westminster wonks
not
excited.
From the king.
Everyone's saying that she should be the next Prime Minister off the back of this, so who knows? She could be.
You know, I saw a tweet where it said, wasn't she fantastic? She should be the next Prime Minister. I said, I don't think being able to hold a sword is a qualification to lead the country in 2023.
It's not a bad start, though, is it, Benjamin?
I think we did get past that a century or so ago.
I just absolutely love Prince Louis's massively chaotic energy. I think it's fantastic. He's absolutely feral, clearly, and it just goes to show. I wonder what he obviously is.
Reminds us of someone.
Yeah, exactly. I resonate with him and Ben from Outnumbered. But I just think that you can only imagine what he gets up to behind the scenes as well. It's a good job they didn't hand him that sword, otherwise there'd be a few headless people.
I mean, Kate was quizzed actually outside of the palace by someone on the Mall, and they said at that point, Kate said at that point that she didn't know what Louis was going to get up to, frankly.
Yeah.
So I think that's been proven by what he did get up to. But he was brilliant, I thought. He added energy.